Have you ever wished you had a sheep living on your desktop who would sometimes give really good advice? Hey guys, a week ago, as a fun side project, I decided to learn how to make a desktop pet. A cute little sheep that sits on your taskbar. I call him the advice sheep. When he's on your desktop, he likes to alternate between walking, sleeping, giving advice, and doing absolutely nothing. It's a cute little sheep that keeps you company while you're working on your computer. In this video, I want to talk about how I made him in 3 days with no experience, and how you can try him on your computer if you would like. You can think of it as a mini dev vlog. So without further ado, let's talk about the idea. I got the idea to make a desktop pet after watching some videos on YouTube. I watched Shar, who made a little frog pond on her desktop, and also Rachel of Tech, who made a little bird that would fly around your computer. But when I tried to download them, it turns out their desktop pets only worked on Windows computers, so as a Mac user, I couldn't actually try it out. That's when I thought about wanting to make my own. I've always wanted to get into game dev, and I think making a desktop pet would be a really good introductory project to get experience in a game engine. I did some research on which game engine would be the best to use for a beginner, and I landed on Godot. Before I began, I brainstormed what I want the desktop pet to look like. I love cats and dogs, but I do think they're a little bit overused and other animals could be shown some more love. In the end, I decided to make the persona of my desktop pet to be a sheep. Personally, as someone who plays social deduction games on her YouTube channel, sheep has a special place in my heart because it's an endearing term for someone who gets fooled and tricked easily. I thought it would be a cute idea to have a sheep as the desktop pet that's able to sprout out random advice and give wisdom. Since I thought the dichotomy of using a sheep, someone who gets fooled easily, as the advice giver would be kind of funny. So then I got to working. On day 1, I started with the coding logic of the game. I created a new project in Godot and loaded in a little character sprite. I wanted to get some of the coding logic done before jumping into the art, so I used a asset pack that I'll link in the description. And then I got to trying to make the window transparent. As you may know, a desktop pet is a little thing that sits on your computer while you work, so you want to be able to see the rest of your computer screen while you have your desktop pet open. To make the window transparent, all I had to do was go to project settings and then toggle the Make Window Transparent button. It worked like magic, but then I encountered 2 challenges. The first challenge was that after the window is transparent, that doesn't mean I'm able to click within the window. So then I did some research and found a property called Mouse Pass-Through Polygon, which would allow you to accept mouse events within the polygon, but then mouse events outside the polygon will be passed through. This allowed me to hit my first milestone of having the pet on the screen and being able to still work with the desktop pet application open. The second challenge I faced was trying to get the desktop pet to drag across the screen. Since I want it to be so if your desktop pet has wandered off somewhere that you don't want in your screen, you'll be able to click and hold to be able to move the desktop pet to somewhere that won't interfere with your work. That's when I noticed that I actually had a bug in my code that was preventing mouse pass-through polygon from working. When I try to click on the desktop pet, it doesn't think I am clicking within the polygon, and it wouldn't let me drag my pet if I have mouse pass-through polygon turned on. I spent a long time trying to figure out and debug, but I wasn't able to come to any resolution. I made a post in the Godot community and asked if anyone might know how to resolve my issue. And then I decided to call it a day and end it there. On day 2, I didn't want to start with the coding again. I wanted to get the art done so that it made me feel more accomplished. So I started by drawing some pixel art of the sheep. I used Procreate, and there's not actually a default pixel brush in Procreate, so I watched some tutorials about how to make your settings, tweak it so that you get a pixel brush, and I drew some pixel art of the sheep. I had some different ideas of how I wanted the sheep to look, but I ended up on this little cute chubby guy with a little bell in the middle. And I drew some different poses of the sheep where they're in idle mode, they are walking around, they are sleeping, They're in a huge deep sleep with all their legs sprawled up in the air. And after I was done with the art, I loaded them into Godot, and my desktop pet was looking much cuter. I wrote a script for the sheep to switch between 6 different states. There's the idle state, the look around state, the walk state, the sleep state, the deep sleep state, and lastly, the advice state, where the sheep is able to give advice. For how I wanted the advice system to work, I wanted the sheep to randomly blurt out advice at extremely random times that you would not expect. And I also wanted every advice that they give to be fully random. Of course, one way I could do it is by writing out a list of advice myself and have the sheep cycle through them. But then I thought if I knew all the advice that the sheep would give, it would no longer be enlightening. And I wanted the sheep to say things that even me myself would not expect. So I turned to this API called Advice Slip. And an API stands for Application Programming Interface, which allows different software applications to communicate and interact with each other. It's kind of like a service that I could have my desktop pet use in order to fetch random advice from the internet. For example, if you want a random advice, you can go to their website and then click on the URL api.adviceslip.com/advice, and it will give you a random advice like, don't take life too seriously. So in order to integrate this API with my desktop pet, I learned how to call APIs on the Godot engine, and I made it so once the desktop pet is able to receive the advice, it displays the advice on top of its head and blurs it out like a thought. So that's how the sheep is able to blurt out random advice. I was still having some trouble with mouse pass-through polygon, but I decided to leave that off until day 3, where I would finally figure out what was going on. And so now comes day 3, the final day of my project. I had pretty much most of the logic done. I added some code which allowed the sheep to run around your taskbar and change the different speeds at which the sheep runs. I also made it so when you click on the sheep, it emits heart particles to mimic kind of like you're petting the sheep. But at this point, I was still stuck on the challenge I had on day 1 of how to get the sheep to drag and drop across the screen. And luckily, someone actually responded to my post in the Godot community about how to debug what I was facing. And I don't know if they'll ever watch this video, but I want to say a huge thank you. They give a bunch of suggestions, but one of them that really helped me pinpoint what was wrong was they suggested I use this toDraw function to draw the polyline of that collision polygon. So this would actually allow me to see what the collision polygon looked like. After following this advice, I saw that indeed the collision polygon that I have doesn't actually match the shape of my desktop pet. The collision polygon that I actually had was much smaller. After realizing this mistake, I went back to fix it in the code so that the collision 2D shape of the desktop pet actually matches the desktop pet. And then I was pretty much done. I made some finishing touches and then I exported my project. Let me give you a showcase of all the functionalities. Now, if you would like to give the desktop pet a try, I made a page on itch.io that would allow you to download the pet for Mac and Windows. All you have to do is click download now, and there's an optional donation page, but you can just click no thanks, take me to the downloads, and you'll be able to download the files for Mac and Windows. I don't have a Windows computer myself, but I asked a friend with Windows to playtest it, and he said it worked fine. But if you decide to give it a try and you encounter any difficulties, let me know and I'll see if I can fix it. Fair warning, the sheep pet can sometimes be a little crazy, because the advice that it gives comes from the Advice Slip API and I don't control them. I've gotten some pretty funny / interesting advice, especially when you take it into the context that it is a sheep who's sprouting out these kinds of advice. But I'll say most of the advice it gives are pretty harmless and inspirational. I've been keeping my desktop pad open, and it's just been making me feel much happier when I work on my laptop. Hope you guys enjoyed this random devlog about a fun project I've been working on, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!